All right, Scott, big news. We haven't talked about it at all. This is our first reaction. This happened about an hour ago. I got in my car, drove up, and figured we had to make this recording. We had to do it. And we're going to talk about the DeAndre Hopkins, David Johnson dynasty trades. And I mean, this affects so many players. This affects star players. And let's hear some initial reactions.
Yeah, I mean, initial reactions were honestly my first thoughts when I saw the initial trade was that it was a good trade for the Houston Texans to get basically a free draft pick to take David Johnson. And, because normally the everyone's bashing the Texans, everyone's bashing Bill O'Brien.
Okay.
And initially it was reported that they were going to get a 4th round pick to take David Johnson, basically.
Okay.
And Arizona essentially had to give up a pick just to get him off their books. But then it kind of broke a little bit later that it was a bigger deal and that it included Hopkins in the trade. And then it just completely flips the other way. I mean, essentially they swapped 4th round picks and they traded an additional 2nd round pick for Hopkins and got David Johnson back in the deal. So yeah, just ridiculous.
I've been driving, so I really haven't got to look at the numbers or anything contract-wise, but why would the Texans consider this? Because I know everyone's completely bashing them, but obviously they're a professional organization. They make millions and millions of dollars. They're paying these decision makers as 6 figures each, obviously. I mean, these people are not idiots behind the realm. What's the thought process, at least? Like,
honestly, I don't really understand the reasoning for it. I know there was a Peter King rumor this morning that I actually was kind of making fun of in a different Groupme chat. He had said, don't be shocked if Hopkins gets moved. And I'm like, well, a lot of the prior things Peter King has talked about have really never come to fruition.
Yeah.
But he is one of the more plugged in guys. He's been in the NFL for longer than we've been alive. And
yeah.
So, I mean, maybe he had a little bit of inside word there that they were shopping him a little bit harder than normal, but this wasn't even on the radar. Like, this wasn't even on the radar that it was part of this deal. And all of a sudden they announced that it's part of this trade. I mean, I still can't wrap my head around it. I think one thing that you're going to probably see now is guaranteed that the Texans are going to draft a receiver. They're going to draft one of these receivers high in the draft. They're probably going to be taking a receiver, got to be 2nd round at this point. So, there's going to be a rookie that lands there. They're clearly not going to go into the season with Will Fuller, Kenny Stills, and Kiki Kute. They're going to draft a receiver. So that's probably a decent landing spot for, someone like Jalen Reagor maybe, or someone, one of the receivers that falls a little bit in the draft. Denzel Mims or Jalen Reagor come to mind. Or I could also see them, I've kind of been joking around with this a little bit too, but I wouldn't be shocked if they went out and just compounded this even more and traded draft picks for someone like AJ Green.
Yeah.
And I got the AJ Green jersey on, but I could just see it right now. People giving, Bill O'Brien crap for trading Hopkins, and they go out and they overpay for AJ Green. And then in the end, it looks like it's basically AJ Green for DeAndre Hopkins. And you're like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah. Okay. My first thought with this, I mean, this is completely off the wall, but my thing is, what if they made this trade thinking that they're going to get Amari Cooper and then realize maybe they can just flip DeAndre Hopkins, pay a little bit more for Amari Cooper, and pick up a 2nd round pick?
I don't think they can sign Amari Cooper, though. So, I mean, yeah, if something like that happens,
space?
Not from what I can see right now, they don't.
Okay.
But I mean, yeah, I think anybody can make the cap space. I don't think that's necessarily an issue. But I mean, clearly there has to be another move coming. So there has to be, they're going to add another receiver somewhere. So it's just a matter of who do they add and what does this deal look like in the end. But man, I mean, regardless of what they do afterwards, the fact that they gave up this for, Hopkins, like, you couldn't get anything better than that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just doesn't. And I mean, they have a late 2nd round pick. And now they have pick 40 from Arizona. So they have 2 picks in that range where, don't be shocked if they take this. This would be kind of strange, but don't be shocked if they take 2 receivers.
Yeah.
I mean, Kenny Stills' contract, they can get out of Kenny Stills' contract. So
No, you see,
who
that was
knows?
the thing. Whenever I got asked in the Patreon group chat earlier this morning about the DeAndre Hopkins rumors, and then I completely blew it off. I was like, 0% chance that happens. I mean, it's like a non-story. And then I was like, Kenny Stills is owed $7 million, and he has zero dead cap. If they're getting rid of a wide receiver, they're just cutting Stills, you know. And then that's why it
Yeah.
was. I was dumbfounded whenever I saw that.
Yeah, I mean, they could get rid of Kenny Stills, and they clearly, I kind of like Will Fuller a little bit, but I'm not going to go down that road of buying him based on this, because I think he's very similar to one of those guys that he's already surpassed any value that you can get for him in trade. He's worth more on your roster, regardless.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter what he does, even if he has a season where he only misses like 1 game or 0 games. He's never going to shed the injury tag that has followed him for his entire career. So,
Yeah.
I mean, he's not really somebody I'd want to invest in. I don't care what his situation is. So we'll see what this situation looks like going forward. They're definitely going to add another receiver, but
Okay,
just
well,
wouldn't
real
be shocked
quick,
if they.
let's kind of talk about what this does for their dynasty value. And for
Sure.
DeAndre Hopkins, I know it might be like at least from what I've seen, people aren't really moving him around, but I think it kind of hurts Hopkins just because I think in Arizona they're going to spread that ball around, and I don't think they're going to force feed him targets like they did in Houston. And especially if you just look at the trend of, I know it's super generic and it's hard to peg case by case, but the wide receivers changing teams. This is different, but you still have to look at that, in my opinion. And I think that. I mean, Hopkins is not going to have the value that he does at this time next year.
Yeah, I mean, I saw some stats floated around that Hopkins is the only receiver that's averaged at least 30% of his team's target share for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And I believe he was almost 35% for the Texans in the last 2 years. So I can't imagine that he gets anywhere near that volume in Arizona. But at the same time, could it be one of those where maybe he's in a little bit better of an offense that uses him maybe in a little bit of a different way? I don't know. I think it's a big impact for Arizona. I see a lot of people kind of crapping on Christian Kirk, but I actually think this helps Christian Kirk a lot.
Yeah, they play 2 different positions.
Yeah, and again, we'll see what Arizona does in free agency or in the draft, but I think it's a fair bet to say they're not going to be using an early pick on a receiver. You know, they're probably not going to use their first round pick on a receiver at this point because they need help otherwise in other places. So kind of what you see right there with Arizona is what you get. So I certainly, if Christian Kirk starts to go at a discount, I like him. And, you know, we'll see what they do on the other side with Isabella and Akeem Butler and Keyshawn Johnson. I mean, they're going to run 3 or 4 receivers, but I don't know. I think it just makes their offense a lot different and a lot better. But yeah, I wouldn't move Hopkins up. I think he's going to get a lot of buzz, but man, he was a tough guy to sell over the last couple of weeks. Like you weren't able to cash out at the same price you were a couple years ago. But if this is any spike, I'm certainly listening on deals for him now.
Well, real quick, tell me I'm crazy, but Kyler Murray, QB3 in Dynasty. Is that too far? Is this the Baker Mayfield season all over again?
I already was DMing with Ryan McDowell. We were talking about Kyler for Watson, and it's Kyle. You will not be able to trade Watson for Kyler right now.
Yeah,
you go try to do that. Right. I mean, it might cool down if Houston makes a couple other moves. You know, maybe they do get like AJ Green or like you said, Amari Cooper, or they draft a couple receivers. It may move Watson up a little bit to where you can maybe pull it off straight up. But you go try to send that deal right now, you're gonna get laughed at.
Yeah. Okay. Last question, then we'll end the video. We got to talk about David Johnson because I thought David Johnson was left for dust. I made a video about him 2 or 3 days ago, and I think this is a massive boom to his value. I mean, because the Texans aren't cutting him at this point. There's no way they do, and he's the starting running back for the Houston Texans now. Are we worried about Duke Johnson or them bringing in someone?
No, I think what's going to happen is they're going to give David Johnson a shot to be basically what Lamar Miller's been the last couple of years before his injury. And let's see how it turns out. I think it comes down to, I'm not aggressively buying David Johnson, but the places that I have him, I'm, willing to listen to offers, but at the same time, I'm not in a rush to sell him because I don't think they traded for him to make him fight for a job. I don't see him bringing in another running back or drafting one high. So I think they're going to give him a legitimate shot at getting a lot of volume. And I mean, go back and look at what Lamar Miller did in 2018 and 2017. it wasn't sexy, but it was, mid-level running back 2 production.
Yeah.
And I think if you get that from David Johnson based on, where you thought his value would have been 2 or 3 months ago, after we saw basically him be non-existent at the end of the season, I think that's a fair bounce back. But I definitely wouldn't be selling him until we get to the season. Everyone's going to be trying to buy low, but now is just not the right time. So I would hold until we get to the season. If he starts producing in the season, getting 15, 16, 17 touches a game, that's when I'd look to sell if I'm one of those teams. The old sell your running backs and try to compete at the same time and just backfill with, handcuffs and whatever. That's the move I'd make with Johnson.
Awesome. Is there anything else to the situation, or are we moving on?
We're going to do other videos, but I just saw a tweet that's it looks like it's very intriguing. So we can maybe step on that for the next video, but it's Stephon Diggs. Looks like maybe
I saw that too. All right, we'll get into that in the next video.
Yep. Okay.